those anxieties, we put those in your hands, dear God, and we're just going to worship you and study your word. We lift all the names that we've talked about today, those with COVID, those with all these different things going on, just the world in general. But again, we always know you're large and in charge. So we put those two in your hands, and those are seeking doctors. Make sure the doctors are on the A game. Beat the families, because there's a lot of families out there suffering. Comfort them. We just love you and adore you. It's your name that we pray. Amen. Got stung by a bee yesterday. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Because it got up underneath my shorts. You're absolutely right. I was at City Hall and I'm going, ow! Yeah. And somebody told me that too. I got stung. So I saw it. It happened to me too. Good. So we're talking about submission. And we talked about this last Wednesday, and then we'll continue with this. Just it includes two actions. Submission includes recognition. The recognition of one's position. It is, again, whether it's assigned one or a position based on age, skills. Depends on where you are. You look when you started jobs or, started school, or, when you were in high school, there was going to be certain things as a freshman. Or you go to college as a freshman, in professional sports, you're a rookie, know your place kind of a thing. But submission requires that we see the big picture and recognize that where we stand in relation to everyone else. Then there's a willingness. Biblical submission is not defeat. And so many times people look at that when you say that word, well, you got to be submitted. Well, it's like putting your hands up and surrendering, and it's not. It's an act of will. It's accepting a role. It's accepting a task, a position. And, I keep going back into doing bitty basketball and some of these things. And where, even in most of these sports, little leagues, it's all about everybody gets a trophy. And it's not about understanding the role that you have and working towards it and moving up. You see that in the business world. Why can't I, I just got this job. Why can't I be the boss? I noticed that was one of the big things I noticed selling real estate. When I first started selling real estate, and you saw a lot of these young couples, and so maybe think about yourself. It's the first house you bought, and how okay, we could afford this, and then we can afford this, or we add, and we can do these things. And you knew there was a progression. Where a lot of now, it's like, I want the big house right now. Yes, and everything that goes with it. I want the big house and the boat and all this other stuff. And submission is not slavery, because slaves have no choice. Submission is just a positive response to accepting your rightful place, whether that place is first or last, or this is where I am. If I'm, and I always like to, even as teaching in the school, just because somebody's a custodian doesn't mean they're, they might not be paid the most, but I felt there's always a major respect there, because they're doing a job. And, where can you help, or how can we help? And that's, I've had teachers that wouldn't pick up anything. That's not my job. And I said, that makes no sense. And so we understand where we're at, and we've got to be willing to help. We live in an ordered universe, created by God to provide for the greatest human fulfillment and joy. God knows what he's doing. We got to, back to that trust. God knows what he's doing. How everything fits. So it's amazing when you really break it down. It's amazing how you see all those little pieces just fit together so wonderfully in this universe and on this earth. Too much of the spin this way or not this way, no life could exist. Too much of this, how everything just fits. And I think God did it. He did it for us. The problem began when the angels refused to keep their position in order. They either wanted to be on God's throne or refused to serve man. Instead, they just tried to destroy man. I don't know about you people, but sometimes that devil likes to get on your shoulder and whisper things to you. It's all right. It's okay. It's okay, Susie. Once created, humans wanted to leave their position. They wanted to be in God's position and know good from evil. This is just reviewed from last Wednesday. The result was spiritual rebellion, sin, destruction. After the initial rebellion, God established a temporary order that had three layers. There's going to be government, there's going to be society, and there's going to be family. These were established to guarantee some form of harmony. We need harmony in a sinful world until Jesus would return a new order, and we would establish never to be challenged again. So we need this, and God says there's got to be order. It's important there has to be order. There's order, really, if you look at it, whether we like it or not, there's an order of things in the world. People continue to rebel against the temporary order in many ways, causing all kinds of problems. This is what we're seeing today. People are rebelling against God's structure, rebelling against God's order. Peter says that when a person experiences God's saving grace, that grace neutralizes that rebellious spirit, and that person is able to recognize the big picture. I get it. I see where I'm supposed to be, and you're in this whole scheme and God's plan, that we're all part of God's plan. All of us. That we all have a purpose in God's plan. Some could be very, very huge. And some could be small, but it all fits together. And it has to work that way. We also be able to willing to take their place, where it is, in order to serve and glorify God. As long as we don't care about us, but giving God the glory for everything. Rebellion does not glorify God, but accepting one's place willingly and profitably, this glorifies God and contributes to peace on earth and the growth of the kingdom. So this is where I think we left off last time. In chapter 2 and 3, Peter reviews how grace means submission in these three areas. God enables submission to the government. Sometimes this is tough. As Peter writes, "Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers to abstain from fleshly lusts which wage war against the soul. Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation." So, hey, be careful. People are watching. They're checking you out. I think it was how we handle things when Jesus at one point was in Philippi, Caesarea, and talking and about how we deal with other people and what example that we have to be to other people. And you think about the town that Jesus is talking, and it was like a border area. It was on the port, and people from every which way were there. Every different religion. You walk down the street, and it was every god known to man was being honored somehow, and he was just bringing his boys in and saying, okay, this is how it's got to be. This is the order that we have to be. And it's not out there, hey, Jesus, can we burn down these other temples? Wouldn't that be a good idea? Hey, there's somebody saying stuff that we don't believe in, so let's go beat them up. Hey, there's a protester, they're protesting. Hey, let's go. No. People are observing. They're going to watch. As Christians, they lived in the same environment as the pagans did, and therefore were subject to the same temptations and pressures. And this is the thing, wherever they were at, that city that I did, Caesarea, was like Las Vegas on steroids. As far as anything you wanted was going to be in that city. And there's going to be, I don't care who you are, there's going to be those temptations. Peter tells them that as Christians, they are to act in a manner befitting their calling, and in doing, win the respect of non-believers. That's the important thing. That people, you never talk bad about that person. You never get into, and somebody's getting these jokes, you're always walking away, or you're doing these things. Why do you do that, Obviously you get that respect. These Christians had left paganism and were being criticized by their pagan friends and relatives for leaving their old religions. Peter says that their good conduct may work in such a way as to win these people over to the very religion they criticize and end up glorifying God themselves. I don't know if when you became a Christian or whatever, and you change your ways and different things, how sometimes your friends change a little bit. You don't see some of the ones you always did. You still talk to them. Still their friend. But, I used to tell students that all the time. Hey, be careful who you hang with. Because if they're doing something wrong and you're hanging with them, because they'll always say, well, I would never do it. Well, there's going to become a point where either you're going to start doing what they do, or they don't want you with them because you're making them feel bad because you're not doing it. And so you got to be careful on some of these things. And it's for us not to criticize, but hopefully you can win them back or win them over to just see and start glorifying God. Peter tells them that as Christians, they are to act in a manner befitting their calling, and in doing so win the respect of non-believers. To act in a manner befitting their calling. What's that mean? To act in a manner befitting their calling. Howard? Walking the walk. Got to have the talk, but you got to walk it. And understand that what a privilege it is, what an honor to serve God. And that sometimes, and that's got to be the mindset as we get up. Whew, I got up this morning. I get to serve God today. Sometimes it's we get up and we're not real happy and miserable and don't want to talk to no one. That's not my... How do you wake up? Are you a happy person? Because you're always happy. Joy, are you... Do you need... How many people say, just let me have my cup of coffee. Don't talk to me for a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. How many just... You just get up like as soon as your eyes open. I'm bing. Hey, Bernie, what do you think we're going to do today? Hey, you want to go out again? Yeah. Just please slow down a little bit. Let me have my coffee. Let me just... How are you when you wake up, Bill? Are you like ready to rip and roar, or do you just... I just see you just get up and ready to go. So... After an hour or two, yes, I am.
I like, well, calm your horses.
Yeah. Who let the horses out the barn already? No, I don't. I'm the only one. No, I mean, in my family, I know you're ready because you get up and you hey, good morning, brother. And she'll be sitting there and just going, and you hear that on the phone. Ding, 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 ding. That's Evelyn. And she's happy. Not just. How was Ernie? Was he like? Yeah. Yeah. It was especially important to have good conduct because in those days, the criticism and some persecution were also coming from the government. God authorized the idea of human government, but does not specify or bless a particular form. It's not like he told us what form of government that we need to have. There's nowhere in the Bible as well. In Acts, the beginning of first year, God, Jesus sat down and wrote, we're going to have separation of powers. I think the right government might be a democracy or this or that. But God authorizes the idea of human government. He doesn't say one's, kings, governors, president, chief. Peter shows them this part of this acceptable behavior includes respect and obedience for the form of government that exists at the time. Here it is. This is where you're at. And it's, again, and Johnny's made some good points as we've been talking. A lot of people with this election coming, a lot of people are freaking, what's going to happen, November 3rd or whatever. And it's going to be what it's going to be. God's in charge. And who knows what his plan is. It could be, hey, we're going to continue with this, or it might be, hey, you know what? You guys have been pretty lax. Now deal with. Now you're going to have to be prepared to stand up for your faith, not through protests or anything, but there might be a line drawn in the sand where they're going to ask, well, this is the new law. You're going to have to do this because, I can't do that. I'm sorry. I can't do that. And so it might be like the early Christians. They try not to make a spectacle of themselves. They didn't try to do any of these things. But yet when it came to denouncing God, denouncing Jesus Christ, now you don't ask me to do that. And they said, well, you'll die. Well, then I guess I die. Simple as that. As Paul said in prison, I might die here in prison. And if I do, good. I'm going to heaven. I'll do that. If they say go out and you're free, good, because I'm going to continue to talk about God. So either way, I win. He said it's easier to get killed and just go to heaven, not have to worry about it anymore. But if I don't have to, well, then I guess I'll have to keep witnessing. So this is what Peter wrote. Submit yourselves to the Lord for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to be a king as the one in authority or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. For such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. Act as free men and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bondservants of God. Honor all people, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. Interpret that for me, someone, please. What are we supposed to do as Christians? What stands out as you look at that? Okay. He said love one another. Love the brotherhood. Honor the king. Yeah. Do I have to? Do I have to? Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Act as free men and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil. I always like that too. But use it as a bondservant. God, that my freedom is what God gave me, and how can I get closer? How can I help more people? So I like, for such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. How and why are Christians to submit to civil authority? They submit to civil because it's been established by God in order to preserve order in society. We need to have order in society. We have to have order in society. This is so regardless of the form or style it takes. And that's another difficult one. Peter says to do so will remove any chance for non-believers to lend criticism at Christians. Because they're always looking. You know that. They're always looking. And boy, when they find a Christian or someone that's done something wrong or whatever, boy, is that the big news. And some have. And boy, you look at some of those, even the TV evangelists who in the beginning were really doing really good things. And then they got caught up in the money or got caught up in these things and whatever. They were human. But man, if something like that ever, man, the news is all over that. They said he was a Christian. Let's make the church look bad. And we got to be careful of that. He also says the secret of living under any kind of human authority, whether it's democratic like the United States or despotic like Iran, is to realize three things. Number one, we are free from God's condemnation and thus are truly free. We are free. It is a despotic, where it's one person, like a dictatorship, where, again, they can make up whatever, from, the Shah of Iran, some of these things where you have no rights, and I'll tell you what rights you have, and it might not be the same ones tomorrow. Our purpose is to establish the kingdom of heaven on earth. Not any human kingdom on earth. Let the unbelievers worry about that. But what we want to do is, we've got to be careful when when I say to establish the kingdom of heaven, but is what heaven wants us to do, as Jesus prayed, about, on earth as in heaven, and we need to show love and forgiveness in these things. That's got to be the foundation, because it's going to be magnified in heaven. And so having a kingdom of heaven here on earth is where your priorities are going to be. You need to make sure our priorities are in the right place. And if we do that, then all that other stuff will let the non-believers try to figure out, and they're not going to. It's always that struggle for more money, more property, more fame, more whatever, and it's fleeting. They're never going to get their hands on that, what they feel is important on the earth. They're never, ever going to figure that out, no matter who it is. I used to make points like that in school because I'll drop names of, trying to think here, Jimmy Brown in football. You know, back when I was a kid, that was the greatest running back. You tell some of these kids who watch, never heard of him. Who, Jimmy Brown, what? Larry Bird in basketball. Somebody can't even remember Magic Johnson. I never heard of him. Was he good? Was he good? Kind of a thing. So my point was always that at that point, they thought they had everything that they, as a player, it doesn't take very long. Michael Jordan, after us all. And it was like, yeah. I say, like the room that I taught in at Algonac, there was for maybe, when I first got there for, I don't know, maybe 10 years, or there was a window there that Jonesy was the art teacher. And one of the projects they could do is they'd take a tile, ceiling tile, and paint different things on it. And so my ceiling, my room was almost filled, but there were certain things that I said, just not going to make one and bring it. If you want to do one, then let's talk. Either it's got to have High Street in there somewhere, or it was. I had a lot of religious ones and different things, but I think about it now, they're still up there. Because I remember when I got that room, it was Mr. Greenwood's room, and he only had one tile. And it didn't take very long. Kids goes, who's a Mr. Greenwood? And I know there's kids.
Well, he got Dr. Black sportsmanship, and he did that large play, and my sister wanted to know if they could, Uncle George would really love to have a flying glove of football, and they said no, they wanted somebody else. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah.
No, if there wasn't even a football player, and Uncle George would have loved football the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah, but they don't know, and that fleeting fame, and that's the thing. I know that these kids that are in my room now, when I was my last year teaching, they were 7th grade, so these kids got to be walking in that classroom going, they might know because I did biddy ball or something with them, if some of them knew, but that's fleeting fame, and that's just the way it is. Like for, Jimmy DeBoyer, and it was, he'd come to practices. Jimmy DeBoyer, if you don't know Jimmy DeBoyer, he was a great athlete in Algonac. Freckles. Yep, but Jimmy would come to my basketball practices just to sit there and watch, and as soon as he walked in the gym, I'd stop practice. All right, everybody come here. And I asked Mr. DeBoyer to get over here and just say, this is Jimmy DeBoyer, Mr. DeBoyer. And, he did this. He was, back in the day, he was one of the legends of Algonac. You're going to hear the name, now you know the face, and it's still, these things, and this is what he's saying. That's what the human is trying to grasp. This is what most people think. And if I just get there, then everything's going to be fine. Think of yourself, milestones. We always talk about that in psych. Milestones. 16. Man, my life is going to be set. I get my driver's license. 18, 21. Those. Notice how those, you couldn't wait till you were 16. You couldn't wait till you're 21. Then all of a sudden, you didn't want to turn 30. You didn't want to turn 60. 63, so maybe, but, so, Howard, you had something. Just a mist. He said all the time. Yep, just a mist. And number 2, we are slaves of God, and so no one can truly enslave us. We are a slave to God. No one can enslave us. And that's the whole thing. They can hurt us, they can kill us, but they can't enslave us. Grace means that we submit to our human rulers because in doing so we can carry out our true purpose in life, and that is to serve our Heavenly Father. And it's been rough lately. You know, everything you see on the news and what's going on and the corruption, and it can make your head spin a little bit. It can get you mad just a little bit, and it's just got to go back, well, God's grace means that he's got me covered. He's got me covered. I'll endure. Grace means submission to the government. If who I want to win the president doesn't win, I'm not going to burn the White House down. I've suffered through other presidents I didn't care about. You know, it is, you know, and you hear all these things. That's why we have a Congress, and that's why we have a Supreme Court, and there's a balance of power. You know, sometimes it looks like the president can just walk and say whatever. He's got a process he's got to work through, and we got to believe in that process. So, grace enables us to be submission over our masters. Do you want to write anything down, Brenda? Just playing. Yeah, I know. Will you guys protect me afterwards? I know it. In that day, slavery was a common social connection between employers and employee. That was just the way it is. Back in the day of Peter, back, you know, during the first century, that's how things were done. You had slaves. You know, either you owned your business, and if you owned your own little business, a lot of times you would get a slave or whatever to help with that. Today, in the most of the world, slavery does not even exist anymore. But Peter's teaching here applies to every relationship where one is in charge and one must report. Servants, be submissive to your masters with all respect, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. Anybody have a bad boss? Oh boy, you know, I mean, I've had a couple that were questionable. Stop it. I know you're talking about another one. You know, Ian, did you ever have anybody that was questionable? I want to know somebody who, that's one of my lines I say all the time here, well, you know, how do you like what you're doing? I said, man, I got the best boss. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Judy, have you always had smooth? Peter says that what counts as a Christian is your attitude, not the attitude of your boss. To be obedient and compliant to our bosses, managers, etc., is our choice, made easier or harder by them. Sometimes it's easy to be good when it makes sense. Sometimes it's not. But always remains our choice. Unless if they're asking you to do something illegal. Unless they're asking you to do, you know, and sometimes you see that, well, can you cover for this or don't look at this and whatever. But for the most part, you know, you can have a jerk for a boss. That doesn't mean you have to be a jerk. You got the choice. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God. But how it is to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it. But if you suffer for doing good and you endure, this is commendable before God. You don't get a promotion or you get moved down and you're doing the right thing. You know, what was that movie, Ian, The Conscience of the Objector there? The one that saved all those people. Hacksaw Ridge. Yeah. Hacksaw Ridge, and just the beating and refused to give in to what he felt was right. And so I thought that was pretty good. The purpose of our attitude is our faith and desire to please God. If we endure injustice patiently, this pleases God. If we suffer because of our own rebellion, we get what we deserve. Well, I'll show them. Guy always said, no, I'm going to, you know, come in late so I can leave early. You know, or I'll just do, I'm going to walk that line. You know, or after warnings, or you rebel. Sometimes you either get fired or whatever. The objective in employee-employee relations is not to win points, rights, concessions, but to please God and win our boss's respect. And hopefully his soul or her soul someday. Going, wow. And you handled that pretty well. Wow, you got something. And over the years of different principles that I've had teaching school, some had some kind of faith, others none at all. You know, there was always a struggle of what you could do, what you couldn't do. Some would allow, say, well, yeah, have a prayer meeting in the morning. Go knock yourself out. Others, well, I don't know if you should. But whatever there's things that I did as a teacher because the principal said we had to do it that made no sense. Lesson plans make no sense to me whatsoever. For a beginning teacher, yes, 4 years, I think the first 4 or 5 years, get yourself organized and stuff. I think even to this day, if some, hey, you need to go teach a history class starting tomorrow. Just tell me where we're at. I'll be ready. You know, and I just hope for 30-some years of doing it. But for me, and I always ask them, why do I have to have them? What's it for? I'm not trying to be, I just help me understand. If it's just because you want it, then I guess I'll do it because you say I have to. I just want to know the purpose sometimes. Is it for subs if I'm not going to be here this day, that you can look and say, well, hey, sub can come in and see what you're doing. I said, that's the case, you know that's not true. Because if I'm lecturing that day and I don't come in, they're not going to lecture that day. So, and they never ever, I don't know, still never could figure it out. Peter says, to this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you as an example that you should follow in his steps. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate. When he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed. For you were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. All of a sudden, it just puts a whole nother aspect on how you want to fight, you want to protest, you want to do these things. And then you wait a minute. What kind of an example was Jesus? We need to follow. He committed no sin. There was no deceit in him whatsoever. When they hurled insults and spit in his face and did all these things, no retaliation. When they were pounding nails into his hands, as they had one hand nailed, he wasn't with that other hand. What would I do to you all? But it was just outstretched hands and say, Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing here. They don't know. They don't know. And that's what we have to be. There's the example. Yes, and you're right, because it's not easy. The one that I would have the hard time. It's not me. Go ahead, do what you got to do. You know, but to her, or to the kids, or these things. That's all of a sudden, it becomes a, yes. Yeah, I like that. yeah, because if I would have put her back in, like 1584, oh my goodness, we'd be reading about her and. Yeah, I like that. I never thought of it. That was a good thought. It's a really good thought. Peter says the purpose we have been called to become disciples of Christ is to continue portraying his example of pure living. Jesus showed us that. This is what he came for, and read some I might even put in the sermon, but not too much. But we have to look at, and I'll just paraphrase a little bit, but as I was looking at this, it made sense, is that too many times people want a very tame, here's Jesus. That it's like I can put him on the shelf, Jesus. You know, where he's not going to force anything on me or whatever. But that's not Jesus. If you're going to follow, Jesus is active. Jesus, if you look at his life, was somebody that's going to go out there and handle these things. You know, it's not, well, put them away, bring them on. No. Having Jesus in your life is you're going to portray what he says, that pure living. Patience and suffering. That's a tough one. And soul winning. By his example, we were saved. And that was... He did lose his patience. He did. And, you know, it... Well, but you look at Jesus, you know, did Jesus lose his patience? You know, he walked in and turned all those tables over. But it was over injustices that people knew better. You knew better, and you're taking advantage of the people. And it's not just taking advantage of them out there. You're taking advantage of in God's house. You know the sanctity, you know, especially the temple and what went on to build this temple and how important it is, and this is where it is, and you are going to take advantage of these people? You know, you brood of vipers, you know, and it wasn't because, he was mad because you knew better. And these people are going to follow whatever you ask them to do. And I think this is why, again, it's just, wow, how things just fit. Because, you know, that part of the old, you know, you look at the Old Testament and the temple and the Holy of Holies, and only the high priest could go in there. And it was his, you know, telling the people, and this is very, very boom, 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 do this. And they got lost in the law. And then Jesus came and said, no, we're going to fix this. We're going to fix this so that you know that you're going to have that personal relationship. Because I'm going to show here's the man that's going to do it. It's not just say, hey, this is how you have to be. Well, you're up there. How do we know? Well, boom, here you go. He did it. He's our example. Christ could have beaten both the Jews and the Romans with his army of angels, but instead, through his patience and submission to the Father, he won some of their souls. Some that we might not even really realize by his example, what he did because of his patience and submission. And, you know, you really look at what really, you know, two big things that won a lot of people over to Christianity. You know, the apostles were out there after Christ had ascended, and the one was that they were willing to die, that they weren't going to give up. So that, you know, these people think, hey, let's go to Colosseum and watch them throw those Christians to the lions and do all these things, and they're singing praises and what's going on? Because they're thinking, well, I wouldn't do that for Mars or Zeus or, you know, Jupiter or any of these gods that you people make up, these Roman gods. Ain't happening. And these people are. And then when that virus hit Rome and people were, you know, the rich were booking and all these people, it was the Christians that came and were helping. Who can we help? And it didn't matter